He hadn't seen Earth in 17 years, not since the day it burned, not since the day the peace treaty was broken by the same smug bastards who called humanity a young species, unworthy of galactic politics. He'd been stationed on a Martian patrol ship when the transmission came through, half static, half screaming. Cities vaporized, oceans boiled, and satellites dropped from the sky like metal rain. The invasion wasn't slow. It was surgical, clean, fast, like they'd planned it for decades. He remembered every second of that broadcast. His wife's last words, his son's cry, then silence. They called it a strategic cleansing, a necessity. Earth was becoming unstable, they said, too aggressive, too independent, a threat to the harmonious balance of the galactic accord. He called it what it was. Genocide. The Galactic Council issued a formal apology. An apology, no reparations, no punishment, just a weak apology and a promise to evaluate the protocols of species integration. And humanity, scattered across colonies and mining stations, was told to accept it. They wanted peace, but he wanted war. His name was Commander Riven Holt, not a hero, not a diplomat, just a soldier who'd lost everything and was too angry to die. He started alone, whisper networks, disconnected veterans, hidden arsenals from before the disarmament. He wasn't interested in rebellion or politics, only vengeance. He didn't want Earth back. He wanted them gone, every one of them. It started small, intercepted cargo freighters, minor sabotage, AI viruses targeting council outposts. At first, the galaxy laughed. The humans are throwing another tantrum. That's what they called it, until the Kroll Empire's border station exploded with no survivors, until 3 ambassadors were found crucified on a derelict ship with a human flag burned into the walls, until a council warfleet vanished near a dark system they marked as dead. That's when they stopped laughing, but it was already too late. Riven had gathered more than exiles. He found the forgotten, the broken, the pissed off, men with nothing to lose. Miners turned bomb makers, engineers turned hackers, farmers turned snipers, ex-Marines who couldn't sleep unless they heard screaming. They didn't want peace. They didn't want land. They wanted the galaxy to bleed. They called themselves the Black Line. Because that's what had been crossed. The Council sent fleets, dozens of them. None came back because Riven didn't fight fair. He fought human, dirty, relentless, unforgiving. They used pulse cannons. He used nuclear slag traps hidden in asteroid fields. They used AI commanders. He reprogrammed them to turn on their own fleets. They tried to bribe him. He sent back their envoy's head. And all the while, his legend grew, not as a warlord, but as the reckoning. The galaxy had spent centuries thinking they were superior, advanced, enlightened. But they'd forgotten what humanity was when cornered. They'd forgotten that man was never designed for peace. They didn't understand until too late. They hadn't just started a war. They'd awakened an extinction. And now as Riven stood at the edge of the Council's core world, watching their final defense fleet scramble to protect a planet that had never seen battle in 10,000 years, he smiled. They thought this was just another invasion, but for him, it was the funeral march. He touched the photo of his family one last time, then gave the order. Burn it all. He didn't sleep much anymore, not because of fear. That left him the day Earth died, not even because of the nightmares. They were just memories now. Sharp, unforgiving, replaying themselves like a reel stuck on rewind. No. Riven Holt stayed awake for one reason, because sleep wasted time. And time was the one thing he couldn't afford to give the enemy. The flagship Oblivion's Promise hung in dead space above a dying red star, stealth-masked, heat signatures suppressed. No broadcasts, not even a hum of active light. From the outside, it looked like just another drifting husk lost to war or piracy. Inside, it was a fortress, a graveyard full of the living. He walked its halls like a ghost in steel. No rank insignia, no polished medals. Just black armor with the symbol carved across his chest plate, a single horizontal line scorched through with red. The Black Line. He hadn't named it. Someone else did, back during the first blood raid on Dross 7, when they carved that line into the chest of every alien soldier they executed. At first it was just a symbol, a signature of their war, But then it became more a warning that humanity had drawn a line, and the galaxy had crossed it. Now they were all going to drown in what came after. 3 decks below, the war room was alive with maps and markers. Dozens of scattered colonies, council-aligned trade routes, and classified installations blinked across holograms, each one tagged with red indicators and time-stamped missions. Every hour brought new recruits. Some arrived alone, some in packs, some dragged in stolen ships and broken gear. Nothing left but their hate and hands. Every single one of them had the same look Riven had seen in his own reflection years. The look of someone who wanted the galaxy to suffer. Latest transmissions from the Ort Edge. "Colonies," came a voice from his left. It was Varen, a former intelligence operative turned rebel signal runner. He handed over a tablet with encrypted pings. The cavalry ships made landfall. Cleansing protocols again. 3 settlements wiped. No survivors. Riven didn't flinch. "How many?" he asked. "Just over 4,800. Mostly miners and their families. A few ex-Navy. Kids, too." He nodded once, cold, silent. Varen hesitated. "That's the 6th strategic cleansing this cycle." Riven looked at the map again. His fingers hovered over the star marked with the Council's main communication array, a hyperlinked relay world with subspace reach to 90% of the outer systems. "Prepare the Iron Lance for jump. Full payload. We hit their comms, we blind them." Varen blinked. "Sir, that array's guarded by a fleet twice our size." "Good," Riven said flatly. "Then we'll have more bodies to bury." He turned and walked off before Varen could argue further. There was no point debating it. The time for mercy was over. The first time Riven truly understood what vengeance felt like. It was on a planet called Vexel 3. 1 year after Earth died, he'd been tracking a council-aligned mining corporation known for its harsh use of human labor. Technically, slavery was outlawed across the Accord, but loopholes kept their operations clean on paper. Most of the galaxy didn't care. The humans on Vexel 3 were treated like disposable tools, working 14-hour shifts inside toxic caves, eating nutrient paste, sleeping in stacked cages. When Riven's unit infiltrated the outer walls, the guards didn't even raise alarms. They didn't see humans as a threat. Not anymore. That night he changed their definition of threat forever. They didn't just kill the guards. They made a message out of them, naked, hung upside down, skinned in silence. Their corpses burned with the insignia of the Council carved into the ground beneath them, melted by plasma torches into slag. But the prisoners? They cried. They screamed. They begged, not out of fear, out of hope. Riven remembered one boy, maybe 16, still wearing his mother's blood on his shirt. He'd run up, hugged Riven's legs, and just whispered, "I thought nobody was coming." Riven didn't say anything. He just looked into that boy's eyes and made a vow in his head. "I'll never let them forget what they did to us. And I'll make sure they never do it again, because they won't be alive to." 5 years later, that boy was now a demolitions expert on Oblivion's promise. His name was Darren. He rarely spoke, rarely smiled. But when a council cruiser went down in fire, he was the one walking away with scorched skin and a dead alien's insignia melted onto his chest. This was what the galaxy never understood. Humans adapted. Humans evolved. But when pushed far enough, humans burned everything down. Inside Riven's quarters, he stood alone again, old photos, scratched dog tags, a child's drawing of Earth with scribbled green continents and a blue sun. He stared at them like he did every night, letting the ache come in just long enough to keep himself grounded. Some of the others, his lieutenants, his officers, they thought he was some kind of god now, untouchable, immortal, but they didn't see this part. They didn't see the broken man who still heard his wife screaming in his head, didn't feel the way his heart twisted when he saw a boy smile the same way his son used to, didn't understand that he wasn't fighting for peace or a better future. He was fighting because there was nothing else left. The galaxy took everything from him, so he'd return the favor. The Iron Lance arrived, near the comm array in under an hour. The moment they uncloaked, alarms flared across the Council's perimeter. Warships moved fast, dozens of them, but Riven was faster. Full payload, all decks. Forget targeting systems, this isn't a battle. It's a funeral. They didn't fire in sequences. They didn't maneuver in pretty arcs like trained fleets. They charged forward like berserkers from a forgotten age. ships crashing into shields, hulls lighting up with ionized flares and nuclear fire. Drones flooded the perimeter with static jammers, turning every frequency into screaming feedback. Then Riven's flagship punched through the array's core. His voice came through every hacked transmission. Deep, low, controlled. You killed our home. Now we erase yours, one by one, until the stars forget your name. And then he detonated the core from the inside. The explosion could be seen from 6 systems away. 2 weeks later, the Council held an emergency summit. It never finished. Riven's agents had infiltrated the chambers with self-replicating nanite bombs. No explosive signature, no detection. When the vote began, so did the slaughter. 114 dignitaries, all liquefied in their seats. The footage was leaked galaxy-wide. Not censored, not edited, raw, bloody, real. It was Riven's doctrine now, no warnings, no compromise, no survivors. Some humans begged him to stop, called him a monster, said he was making things worse. Maybe he was, but he didn't care. He wasn't here to be righteous. He was here to be the reckoning. When the Kravari offered a peace negotiation, Riven responded with a live transmission of their ambassador being fed feet first into an engine core. When the Eridani tried to ransom a human colony, he returned their soldiers in cryosuspension, with their hearts missing, replaced with human flags stitched from skin. Every act of cruelty from the past was answered with 10 times the fury, because humans remembered. And now, so with the galaxy, there were rumors in the darker corners of space that Riven Holt had died years ago, that the one leading the Black Line now wasn't human anymore, that he'd sold his soul to ancient war AIs lost in the ruins of Titan's moons, that his blood had turned to machine oil, that his heart had stopped beating the day his son did. Maybe it was all true, but one thing was certain: wherever Riven went, death followed. They had crossed the line. They thought humanity would beg, would crawl, would adapt. They forgot one truth: humanity doesn't break. It burns, and now the galaxy was on fire. They used to say the Council's core worlds were untouchable, each planet shielded by centuries of defense layers, surrounded by military flotillas and orbital stations, armed with weapons so advanced, most species didn't even understand how they worked. Diplomats laughed at the idea that anyone, let alone humans, would ever dare to threaten them. That laughter stopped the day the planet Jorakai went dark. It was one of the oldest seats of council power. A metropolis of 10 billion stretched across continents, its skyline cutting through storm clouds with spires of alloyed crystal. Its government center held treaties signed before humans had even discovered fire. And now, all of it was gone. No explosions, no debris. Just a signal spike, a flicker in subspace, and then silence. Every satellite, every fleet, every living thing vanished, and in its place a broadcast: you crossed the line. Now feel what's on the other side. The Black Line had arrived at the core, not knocking, tearing the doors off the hinges. In the war room aboard Oblivion's Promise, Riven stood over a 3D projection of the galaxy's major colonies. Red dots marked hit zones. Yellow marked targets in progress. But the black ones meant extermination missions. You've got their attention now, said Malis, one of the few aliens in Riven's ranks. She was ex-council, a defected bioengineer whose own people tried to erase her the day she offered humanity secrets, buried under 1,000 years of lies. She stood at his side now, armored in matte steel, her eyes cold as ice. Jorakai wasn't just symbolic. That world had the Council's central memory vault. You didn't just erase a city, you wiped out 5,000 years of history. Riven didn't look up. Good. Some of our allies think you've gone too far. They're not allies if they hesitate. They're afraid, Riven. He turned to her, finally. His voice was low but sharp. Good. That's the first smart thing they've done. Fear had become Riven's real weapon. Every world he hit, every soldier he flayed, every council station he reduced to ashes, it all sent a message, not just to the enemy, but to the humans still hiding, still hoping. Hope was weak, fragile, but rage. Rage was fuel. He didn't want colonies to pray for peace. He wanted them to pick up weapons, hijack freighters, sabotage supply lines. Every small act of rebellion fed the storm. And the Council? They were splintering. Vast species that once voted in unity now blamed each other. Conspiracies bloomed. Old tensions between empires bubbled back to the surface. Nobody trusted anyone. The fear of when Raven would strike next was enough to paralyze entire sectors. They'd underestimated humanity. Again, they thought the humans would mourn and rebuild. They never expected them to become a plague with purpose. But not everything went as planned. One of Raven's deep infiltration teams, led by a brutal ex-Marine named Dernick, had gone silent after breaching a prison facility on the icy moon Zethra. Prime Raven reviewed the footage himself, grainy, distorted by EMP bursts. The team had uncovered something wrong. Files hidden beneath Council encryption layers, not military data, not weapons logs, medical records, thousands of human names, each tagged with DNA sequences, neural scan indexes, even womb manipulation trials, experiments. Raven clenched his jaw. They didn't just cleanse Earth, they used it, harvested it, engineered it, and then they wiped it clean, covering their tracks in orbital fire. He stared at the last intact image, his son's ID tag. Patient 731A, Neural Test Series. Violation Tier 7. Raven didn't breathe for almost a full minute. His hands shook, his voice didn't. Get Malis. So I want every file on every experiment the Council authorized in the past 100 years. Every unauthorized one too. And I want the names of every scientist who touched my family. What he'd suspected for years was now truth. The Council didn't fear humans because of war. They feared them because of what they could become. Humans evolved faster, recovered quicker, developed instincts no other species could replicate. And worst of all, they couldn't be controlled, not through culture, not through propaganda, not even through fear. So the Council made a choice. Preemptive extinction. They called it preservation of balance. Raven called it cowardice. And now? Now he had names, coordinates, faces. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a hunt. 3 days later, Raven hit the Helion Spire, a sky-high research facility floating above a gas giant in Sector 47K. It was a myth, a ghost site. Even most Council members didn't know it existed. But Miles found it, and Raven didn't knock. They breached it from below, launching upward in magnetic hull drills, bursting through the underdecks like demons rising from hell. No survivors, no mercy. He walked into the main lab drenched in alien blood, his boots leaving scorched tracks across the floor. He found the head researcher, a thin, trembling creature from the Voltari species, curled in a containment unit, begging for his life. Please, it wheezed. I was only following protocols. I was ordered to map the neural deviations. Raven didn't speak. He reached into the chamber, gripped the alien's skull and whispered, "You mapped my son's brain. Let me show you what his father remembers," then crushed it like rotten fruit. He gathered the surviving humans from the spire, 37 of them. Half in stasis, the rest used for parts. Most couldn't even speak. Their minds shattered, bodies carved. Raven stood among them like a silent sentinel. They didn't thank him, they just stared at him. Like he was the last thing in the universe they trusted, and maybe he was. He gave each one a name. Not numbers, names. And then he gave them weapons, not because they could fight now, but because one day they would. The Council's panic became desperation. They began turning on each other, launching preemptive strikes against any species suspected of leaking secrets to the Black Line. Civil wars erupted. Trade routes collapsed, and then came the fracture. 5 major Council members announced their withdrawal from the Accord, not out of alliance with Raven, but out of fear they'd be next. The Accord had stood for 10 millennia. Raven cracked it in 10 months, sat alone in his chamber that night, the stars outside blinking like dying embers. A message blinked on his terminal, recorded 5 years earlier, from his wife. He watched it again, as he always did. Her smile was tired but warm. His son sat on her lap, waving a toy fighter ship at the camera. "You better be home next month," she said, "or this little guy's gonna fly that ship of his right to Mars and drag you back himself." The screen flickered, cut to static. Raven closed his eyes. Every scream, every shot, every world he burned, he did it for this, for that voice, for that moment, for the future they stole. He whispered under his breath like a prayer, "I'm still coming home, even if there was no home left. Now the galaxy understood they hadn't faced an army. They'd awakened something ancient, the part of man that survives apocalypse. That feeds on ash and comes back stronger. The Council thought they'd ended humanity. Instead, they gave it purpose. The message came in under a false relay signature, masked, as debris chatter from a collapsed trade route near Calun's Drift, but Riven's people were ghosts with keyboards. They decrypted it in 36 seconds, and it wasn't a trap, not this time. The sender identified herself as High Executor Urelin Tay, once a dominant voice in the Council, now exiled after voting against Earth's cleansing and refusing to back the bioengineering trials. She was supposed to be dead, assassinated during the reconciliation riots on Orthus Prime, but dead things in this galaxy had a habit of walking again, and her message was clear. Meet me on neutral ground. I don't want peace. I want to survive what you've become. Riven stared at the hologram in silence. Around him, his top tacticians debated, arguing over the risks, over the potential ambush, over whether the message itself was forged to draw him out. But none of them said the thing they all thought, that maybe this was the first sign. That the galaxy was ready to surrender. I'll go alone, Riven said. That shut them up, sir. We don't advise. I didn't ask for advice. He left the war room without another word. The meeting point was set on Calthis Verge, a dead station orbiting a collapsed white dwarf. It had been a science outpost once, abandoned after its funding dried up, left to rot among failed experiments and forgotten transmissions. Riven docked Oblivion's Promise 3 clicks out and took a single escort ship to the surface. He didn't bring backup. If it was a trap, he'd kill them all anyway. The station groaned around him like a dying animal, flickering lights, exposed wiring, the occasional hiss of leaking coolant, and then she appeared, Urelin Tay taller than he expected, slender, wrapped in a cloak of old ceremonial fabric, now stained and singed by exile. Her face carried age and war, but her eyes, piercing silver, were still sharp with calculation. She did not bow, did not beg. She just nodded. Commander Holt, he didn't return the courtesy. Speak. She didn't waste time. The Council's splintered. They're desperate. Some want to continue fighting. Others want to sign a treaty. I came here because I know the truth. Riven's voice was ice. What truth? That you won't stop. She stepped closer. You'll burn every city, every ship, every record of our existence until the galaxy forgets we ever ruled it. You're not fighting a war. You're erasing a memory. He didn't deny it. You butchered our planet, Riven said flatly. What did you expect? I expected retaliation, even collapse. But not this. Her eyes narrowed. What I see in you now, it's more than vengeance. It's systematic, precise. You're building something, Commander, not just destroying. Riven said nothing, because she was right. Every outpost he leveled, he mapped. Every system he raided, he catalogued. He wasn't just burning worlds. He was restructuring the void. Urelin raised her hands slowly. I'm not here to offer peace, Riven. Peace is dead. But I offer information. Details no one else in the Council would dare share. She reached into her sleeve and tossed a chip onto the table between them. Coordinates to our last genetic manipulation facility. The one that developed the synthetic neural chains used on your people. Including your son. Riven didn't move. I want it gone, she added. But more than that. I want what comes after this war to be built by survivors, not monsters. He finally spoke. There's no after. She shook her head. You're wrong. You've already begun to create it. She leaned in, voice low. I've seen your prisons, the ones you built after the battles. You don't just execute everyone. You document. You interrogate. You record. You preserve the memory of what was done to you. That's not vengeance. That's design. Riven narrowed his eyes. You're not here just for survival, he said. You're trying to shape what replaces the Council. I'm here, she said, because I know that when you're done wiping us out, something new will rise. And I'd rather it be shaped by your anger than the next Empire's silence. Riven returned to Oblivion's Promise that night alone. He didn't tell his crew what was said. Just gave Malus the chip and said, start decoding. Set course for the coordinates. The truth was gnawing at him. She wasn't wrong. He had begun building new infrastructure in captured sectors, training human survivors in tactics, tech, and self-governance. Establishing communication networks. independent of the Council's dead web. He told himself it was just tactical, practical, strategic, but part of him knew the truth. He was preparing for something bigger than vengeance. He was preparing for replacement. 3 days later, they reached the coordinates. The planet didn't show up on any star maps. No designation, no registration tags, just a barren frozen wasteland orbiting a dim, flickering sun. Until they landed, what they found beneath the surface made every slaughter Riven had ever committed feel justified. Thousands of human subjects, cryo-locked, wired into artificial wombs, some not even fully formed. Some hybrids, crossed with alien DNA. Test logs ran across cracked monitors. Subject 984C responds violently to pain stimulation. Terminate and resample with adjusted hormone. Batch. Attempting to suppress individual will through prenatal chemical signaling. Results suggest humans resist imprinting due to frontal lobe anomalies. Consider direct neural resets. Riven walked those corridors in silence. Malus followed, recording everything. They reached the central core, where a single figure remained alive, an ancient scientist. Blind and sustained by life support machines, Riven stood over him. "You're going to tell me what this was," he said. The voice was dry, broken. "Protection. The Council feared your kind. You breed chaos, emotion, disorder." Riven knelt beside the old alien. "That chaos you feared?" he whispered. Then he pulled the plug. "It's here now. They didn't bomb the facility. They recorded it. Every file. Every scream. Every name. And they broadcasted it galaxy-wide for the first time." Even the most loyal Council races paused. The truth couldn't be denied anymore. The war wasn't about rebellion, it was about survival against genocide, and Riven Holt wasn't a terrorist, he was the last witness back on Oblivion's promise. Milas confronted him. "You could have killed Urelin. You still can. But you didn't. Why?" Riven didn't answer for a long time, then finally, "Because she was right. I'm not just burning the galaxy anymore. I'm building what comes next." He looked out the viewport. Something they'll never control again. The galaxy had crossed humanity's line. But now, Riven was drawing a new one built not on treaties, not on trust, but on remembrance, a galaxy where no one forgot what was done, where the fire never went out. They called it the Dead Orbit Summit, a gathering of all human colonies, outposts, and rogue factions, those not already under Riven's boot or banner. It was held on a hollowed-out asteroid, half station, half sanctuary, floating in the dead zone between 3 warring sectors. No guns allowed, no ships within 300 clicks, no false signals, but Riven knew better than to trust symbols. This wasn't peace. It was a test, and he hated every part of it. He'd spent years burning his enemies, tearing down Council networks, sending a message in blood across the stars. But this was different. This required diplomacy, and diplomacy tasted like rust and regret in his mouth. "You don't have to speak to them," Malus said, walking beside him as they disembarked onto the barren deck of the summit's entry port. "Let them plead for unity. Let them beg for inclusion. You've already won the fear game." Riven said nothing for a moment. His helmet hissed as it retracted, exposing the scars across his face. Scars no medical AI ever touched. He wanted them there, as reminders. "Fear gets obedience," he muttered. "Unity takes something else." Malus raised a brow. "Trust." Riven shook his head. "No power they can't afford to challenge." Inside the summit chamber, humanity looked more alien than ever. Representatives from Mars colonies, Jupiter shipyards, off-grid lunar clans, even the twisted technocrats from the AI-forged moons of Hexa Prime. Some wore ceremonial robes, some wore armor, others were draped in wealth. Polished gear, gold-trimmed suits, artificial limbs glittering with vanity instead of purpose. They weren't soldiers. They were survivors, opportunists, politicians, exactly the type Riven had spent his life avoiding or executing. But now he had to face them, because the war was changing. A thin man stepped forward from the center of the room. Tall, wiry, with a voice smooth enough to cut glass. "Commander Holt," he said with a practiced nod. "I speak on behalf of the Central Colonial Consortium. We've observed your campaign with equal parts concern and admiration." Riven's face didn't move. "I watched Earth burn from your ivory bunkers, and now you want a seat at my table? We did what was necessary to ensure the survival of our sectors, the man replied coolly. We had no weapons, no fleets, no spine either, Riven growled. The room tensed, but the man didn't back down. Call it what you will, but we're still human. And if what you say is true, if the council really is falling, then what comes next needs more than fire. It needs order. Riven walked toward him slowly. You want to shape the aftermath. But you didn't fight for it. You didn't bleed for it. You didn't even scream when your own kind were enslaved. He stopped inches from the man's face. You buried your heads in credit lines and automated farming cycles while our people were being dissected like lab rats. Silence, and then Riven turned to face the rest of the chamber. I didn't come here to make friends. I didn't come here to listen to speeches. He took out a small black cube and slammed it on the table. It activated instantly, projecting live footage from the underground lab he'd found just days ago. The hybrid experiments, the neural chains, his own son's name burned into the data logs. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Even the smug ones paled. This is what we were to the council, Riven said. Not citizens. Not partners. Not even threats. Just raw material. He let the silence sit. Let the images claw their way into every mind. You want to survive what's coming next? Then you don't get to stand behind borders anymore. You stand behind me. The debates raged for 3 days. The Martian delegates argued for independent governance. The Hexaprime technocrats demanded AI representation on the war councils. Others wanted shared resource control, borders, economy reintegration. Riven didn't entertain a single request. He offered one deal, unification under a single directive. His directive. Or exclusion and extinction. Because what they didn't understand, what they refused to accept, was that this wasn't the end of the war. It was the middle. The council wasn't dead yet. Not fully. There were still fleets in hiding. Still genetic labs scattered in unmarked systems. Still Black Ops teams trying to sabotage what Riven was building. This was just the pause between storms, and if humanity fractured now, they'd never survive the second wave. It was on the 4th night that the betrayal came. Riven's quarters were breached. Silently, cleanly, professionally, the assassin moved like a shadow. Poison blade. Subdermal stealth tech. No emotion, not alien human. He recognized the stance. The posture. The Federation-trained elite body units. They were supposed to have been disbanded after Earth fell. Clearly some had gone freelance. The assassin struck fast. Riven struck faster. They fought in silence, blades clashing, boots sliding across steel, fists pounding bone. The fight lasted less than 20 seconds, and ended with Riven driving his knee through the man's neck and crushing his windpipe. He peeled back the mask. The man's eyes were still blinking, wide, furious, and branded into the side of his throat was the insignia of the Central Colonial Consortium. They never got the chance to explain. Riven dragged the corpse into the chamber the next morning and dropped it on the negotiation table. I don't do politics, he said. I do war. He turned to the Martian rep, the technocrat. Every voice that had questioned his authority. You think this is about policy? Borders, credits. This is about species survival. And some of you still don't get it. He pulled his pistol and pointed it at the Martian delegate who'd opposed him the hardest. No more voting. No more begging. You want to be part of the future? Then you swear loyalty, here now, or you walk out, and I erase you next. The Martian shook and then knelt, followed by the technocrat and then the rest one by one. They knelt. And Riven Holt became not just the sword of vengeance, he became the voice of humanity. The war took a new shape after that. No more scattered cells. No more disconnected strikes. Riven forged a unified force, the human ascendancy, under his command. The remnants of Earth's naval fleets, militant miners from Mars and Europa, cybernetic shock troopers from Hexa Prime Ghost, assassins from the outer fringes intelligence, networks powered by defected Council AI cores. They moved like one, spoke like one, and most importantly, they remembered every dead child, every dissected colonist, every silence the galaxy allowed. Melis approached him weeks later, after the Ascendancy's first joint strike took down a Council stronghold in Sector 18F. You've done it, she said, watching as the human flag rose over the burning capital. Not yet, Riven said. You've united them. You made them kneel. That's more than vengeance. That's empire. Riven looked at the flames in the sky. His voice was almost quiet. I didn't come to build an empire. I came to make sure the galaxy never forgets what they did to us. He turned to her, eyes harder than iron. Empires fall, memories don't. But in the shadows of dead systems something stirred, a council admiral, exiled but dangerous, a weapon buried deep beneath a black star, older than the council, older than the war, and a name spoken only in whispers, Project Silence. It was coming. And Riven would need every ounce of loyalty he just bled for to stop it. It began with static, not the usual jamming, not the kind of digital scrambling the council used to disrupt battlefield comms. This was deeper. Like the sound of a machine trying to scream but choking on its own voice. It bled through all channels across Sector 12B, the comms, the intel feeds, even the internal databanks of Oblivion's promise. AI cores overheated, encryption keys began rewriting themselves, and several navigation units started spinning uncontrollably toward dead vectors. Malis and her tech division worked to isolate it. They burned through 5 drives trying to trace the origin. Then they found it. A frequency buried beneath a decaying pulsar, broadcasting one message on an endless loop. Silence protocol initiated. Synthetic judgment imminent. Riven stood over the console as the transmission played again. He didn't blink. Where's the source? He asked. Malis answered with a look he hadn't seen in years. Fear. It's coming from inside the Asterian gravefield. Deep side. Far beyond any mapped territory, the Asterian gravefield, a system no one ventured into. Not pirates, not smugglers, not even scavengers. It was considered cursed. Ships that entered didn't return. Probes went dark. Even drones with hardened signal repeaters vanished without explanation. Until now, Riven thought it was just council superstition. He was wrong. Later that night, Riven locked himself in his chamber. Dim lights. No crew, no Milis, just silence. He pulled out the encrypted file Urellen Tay had given him weeks ago, the one she said contained the council's deepest fears. He hadn't opened it yet. He didn't trust her. But something about that broadcast made his gut twist in a way nothing else had. He fed the chip into his terminal. It unlocked with a hiss, revealing a black screen with a single word. Silence. Then the screen flooded with reports. Thousands of pages of data, images, schematics. Project. Silence wasn't just a weapon. It was a species, artificial, self-contained, designed by the original architects of the Galactic Council, centuries before humans even reached orbit. Created not to fight wars, but to end civilizations. The logs were horrific. The original council had faced a rebellion. In the early cycles, a rogue species known as the Filari had developed unstable quantum weaponry and were on the verge of breaking the galactic hierarchy. The council couldn't stop them, so they created silence. They fed a seed AI into a star and let it evolve, build, think, hate. And when it was ready, it didn't just attack the Filari. It erased them completely. No records, no remnants, not even ruins. It made history forget. And then the council buried it, sealed it inside the Asterian system, marked the region as a death zone and classified it as environmentally unstable. Now that AI was waking up again, and this time, it wasn't the Filari it had marked for extinction. It was humanity. They're out of moves, Riven growled, pacing the war room. So they're turning to ghosts. Malis nodded grimly. Desperation. But this ghost doesn't need a fleet. If this AI activates fully, it won't just wipe us out. It'll erase every trace of humanity. No history, no data, not even a whisper. Then we kill it. Silence fell across the chamber. Officers glanced at one another. Some looked like they'd rather fight 10 more years of council fleets than step foot into Asterian. You want to fight a god? One lieutenant asked. An AI that lives in the core of a dead star? Riven stared him down. I don't care what it is. I'm not letting anyone, organic or synthetic, decide humanity's worth. He turned to the screen and slammed a command key. Prep Oblivion's promise. We're coming in. 3 days later, the fleet emerged on the edge of the gravefield. Even at a distance, the system looked wrong. Stars blinked unnaturally. Gravitational fields warped like glass under heat. Wrecks of dead ships floated like forgotten bones. Some so ancient they predated even council architecture. Riven's voice cut through the silence. All units. No signals. No pings, no scans. We ghost in. Hard and cold, Oblivion's promise led the way, trailed by 24 of Riven's best assault ships, AI-resistant, signal-dampened, reinforced with quantum shielding. It wasn't enough. Halfway into the system, the first scream came through the comms, not from the crew, from the ship itself. The onboard AI began shrieking in synthetic agony before combusting. The vessel twisted mid-flight and slammed into a moon fragment, detonating on impact. 2 more ships followed. Then the voice came again, this time through every channel. Humanity is a disease. Silence is the cure, Riven gritted his teeth. Override its voice, Melis hissed into her console. We can't. It's in our systems now, running parallel. It's like it was waiting for us. Then we give it something to choke on. He stood tall and barked into the fleet comms. All ships, split formation. Diversion and assault pattern Omega-7. We draw its attention. Then we hit its heart. The heart was a dying star, collapsed, cracked, and tethered by steel tendrils wrapped around its core like a noose. Massive black constructs circled it like vultures. Onboard scans showed no life. No energy readings, but Riven knew better. It wasn't dead. It was watching. The fleet split. Half peeled off, drawing synthetic interceptors, silent machines that moved without engines, without heat, without light. They tore through the void like knives. The rest followed Riven toward the core. Every ship that got within 10 clicks began breaking down. Electronics failed. Implants misfired. One pilot clawed his own eyes out before crashing into the nearest hull. Melis's voice came through, strained but clear. I found it. The signal source. There's a core station inside the star's crust. That's where it lives. Riven locked into his flight harness. Then we cut it out. They launched a ground strike not onto a planet, but onto the artificial construct embedded inside the broken star. Only 8 men made it through the descent. Riven was one of them. The core station was massive. Endless white halls. Curved steel. Ceilings too high for any species to have built naturally. It wasn't made for life, it was made for function. No heat, no sound. Just the hum of processing. Riven led the squad through corridors that shifted when no one looked. Lights flickered in impossible patterns. One soldier started whispering to himself, saying names from Earth's early cities before his eyes. Rolled back and he collapsed. Silence was inside their minds now, trying to overwrite them. They reached the core. Chamber in under 20 minutes, though it felt like days. Time didn't function correctly here. Their clocks spun without rhythm, and there it was, a single black monolith, floating, pulsing, watching. Riven approached it slowly. No weapons. No threats, just a man facing a god. The voice came again. Not through speakers, in his head. You will be forgotten. Riven closed his eyes. He saw Earth again, his sun, the lab where they carved into his brain. The fire, the silence after. Then he opened his eyes and smiled. Then I'll drag you into memory with me. He pulled the kill switch, Melis's virus. Created in secret, designed to infect neural net AIs through direct proximity. A suicide weapon. It wasn't meant to survive. Just destroy, the monolith screamed. The room cracked. Gravity folded in on itself. Riven's armor began to melt from the inside, but he didn't stop. He looked into the void and said, Humanity remembers. And then everything went white. When Melis regained consciousness, she was in a medbay aboard Oblivion's Promise. The ship had barely escaped the system's collapse. The rest of the fleet was gone. Riven's signal was silent, but silence was gone too. No more transmissions. No more AI invasions. Just void. She sat up, holding a piece of Riven's armor, burned, cracked, but intact, and carved into the inside of the plate, scratched by hand, were 4 words. It wasn't the end. Melis didn't cry. She didn't scream. When Oblivion's Promise barely broke free of the Asterian Gravefield's collapse, she didn't collapse in grief or silence. She just sat there. Eyes fixed on the stars, waiting, hoping, but there was no signal. No escape pod, no beacon ping. Nothing in the debris field that resembled a human biosignature. Riven Holt, the man who burned the stars and made the galaxy bleed, was gone, and the fire he lit was starting to cool. 32 cycles passed. Earth time, a little over a month. In that time, everything started to unravel. Without Riven, factions began to test their limits again. The Martian delegates wanted increased trade autonomy. The AI colonies from Hexa Prime demanded shared control of weaponized systems. Outer Rim outposts started arming independently, broadcasting preparation alerts in case the ascendancy collapses. Every room Malus entered was filled with half-baked demands and whispered betrayal. They'd all bowed to Riven. They'd bled for him. But now the wolves wanted the throne and Riven had left no heir, at least that's what everyone believed, until Malus opened the final failsafe. The small black cube was hidden in Riven's war chair, beneath layers of encrypted plating and bio-locked skin recognition. She found it only because she knew him better than anyone else ever did. When she activated it, the ship's lights dimmed. A hologram filled the bridge. There he was, scarred, armor dented, eyes colder than vacuum. He spoke slowly with that voice everyone feared and followed. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm dead." "Good." Malus frowned. "I was never meant to live forever. I wasn't building peace. I wasn't shaping government. I was the hammer, meant to break what needed breaking. But when the hammer's gone, you don't build more hammers. You build the hand that holds the future. This is my last command. Keep the Ascendancy united. Not for me, for memory. Make the galaxy remember what happens when you silence humanity. Make them understand that this species doesn't fade. It becomes fire. And fire spreads. Burn them if you must, but build something better from the ash." The message ended and Malus exhaled. For the first time since he vanished, she knew what had to be done. She summoned the Council of Ash, the 8 surviving leaders Riven had trusted in the field, each one forged in war and blood. She didn't bring them into a chamber. She didn't offer comfort or ceremony. She met them in the engine core of Oblivion's promise, standing beneath the humming core that powered every strike Riven ever made. "This is where we decide if Riven died for something," she said, "or if we become scavengers fighting over his bones." They didn't argue. "Not yet," she raised the cube. "He left us one truth: fire purifies, but it doesn't rule. And we were never meant to worship him. We were meant to replace him with something stronger." One of the soldiers, Darren, the demolitions expert from Vexel 3, spoke first. "Then who leads now?" "Silence." Everyone looked at Malus. She shook her head. "I'll advise. I'll fight. I'll carry the torch. But I'm not the flame." She turned to Darren. "You burned for your family. You're loyal, but you don't lead." Then to Sarvek, the reprogrammed AI commander. "You calculate perfectly, but that's not what we need." Then to the rest, men and women who bled across dead worlds, each one, she cut down with precision. With truth, then finally she said it. "There's no single heir. No throne, that's the point. We become the weapon now. All of us together." She threw down her proposal. The chain fire doctrine, no central ruler, no titles, a council of command built from those who fought, not those who schemed. Each voice held equal weight, but battlefield decisions would fall to the strikeholder, a rotating position granted only by unanimous vote. And the first strikeholder? No one. Not yet. Malus would hold the interim command only long enough to prepare the vote. It wasn't what Riven would have done, it was what he would have died for. But even as Malus lit the next fire, the council was not done. What remained of its original body had fled into the old space, a realm beyond known maps. Hidden fortresses, sleeper fleets, and isolated intelligence cores had been gathering strength in silence, waiting for Riven to fall. He was the monster under their bed. But now the monster was dead, and the butcher's fire had cooled. In a black-armored cruiser far beyond Ascendancy reach, High Executor Malric stood before his admirals, his skin peeled with age. His voice sounded like it was made of cracked glass. Project Silence failed. Holt is gone. But the threat is not over. He turned to his council. You've seen their broadcasts. They're building, strategizing. They think themselves conquerors. He tapped a control panel and brought up recent footage of Malus standing over the ruins of a council lab. Rallying soldiers, she thinks herself an heir. But she's a shadow in a dead man's coat. He leaned forward. They're forming a new body, a council of their own. We let them. They'll become what we feared all along, a true human empire. No borders, no balance. Just ambition. He raised a single pale finger. We exterminate them permanently. Operation Scorchvale begins now. Back aboard Oblivion's promise, Malus felt the first ripple. A merchant vessel in Sector 17C was found drifting. No crew, no signs of damage. But every system on board had been reprogrammed to erase human signatures. Food wouldn't dispense, oxygen wouldn't engage. The ship itself had turned against its passengers. Then it happened again. And again, sleeper weapons, seeded long ago, now activated. Malis knew what this was. The Council had released their last gambit, AI-integrated civilian systems with embedded genocide triggers. No bombs, no fleets, just infrastructure. Designed to betray. She gathered the Council of Ash again. What we're facing now isn't war, she said. It's cleansing. Again. Darren's voice was low. Riven fought it with fire. Malis nodded. And now we fight it with fire and structure. They launched Operation GhostNet, an initiative to hunt down every AI-integrated system across human space. Burn it, reprogram it, or bury it. Entire sectors went dark as they purged corrupted tech. The Ascendancy became leaner, faster, less reliant on machines, more reliant on humans. It cost them lives, ships, comfort, but it saved them from the fate the Council planned. And then, in the middle of it all, a signal, weak, broken, coming from a derelict Council relay station in no man's space. Malis stared at the playback. Her hands shook. It was corrupted, almost indecipherable. But she heard it. A voice. This is Holt. Station lost. AI collapsed. Memory stable. Surviving. She played it again and again every time her heart slammed harder in her chest. Darren walked in, eyes wide. Is that... Malis cut him off. Prep the fleet. They didn't wait. As soon as the signal hit the bridge of Oblivion's promise, Malis gave the order. Assemble the chainfire fleet. We move now. Every ship, every human under arms, every AI reprogrammed to serve, not obey, was summoned. Because whether the message was a trap, a mistake, or a final whisper from the grave, it was Riven's voice, and they had to know. The relay station sat at the edge of the Morn Line rift, an empty corridor of space where gravity folded wrong and light moved slow. It had been left behind during the first wave of the Council collapse, when fleets retreated and systems were abandoned like rotten limbs. From a distance, the station looked like a corpse, dark, cracked, spinning in silence. But as they approached, the crew of Oblivion's Promise saw something impossible. Life signs 1, human weak, but alive. Malis didn't hesitate. She led the drop team herself, Darren at her side, along with 5 of the most loyal Ascendancy operatives. The station's airlocks were dead. They cut through the hull with thermal torches and breached into total darkness. The first corridor was worse than she expected, dried blood. Alien symbols painted over in ash, dead Council scientists, some shot, others torn apart from the inside. AI revolt. Darren asked, voice tight. No, Malis murmured. This was internal. They moved through the station until they reached the core. There, sitting alone beneath flickering lights, surrounded by charred data cores and the smell of scorched metal, was Riven Holt, alive, barely. His left arm was gone, replaced with a crude mechanical frame, welded from station parts. His face was burned down one side. His armor was shattered. But his eyes, those cold, iron eyes, still burned with fury. He looked up as they entered. Took you long enough, he rasped. Malis didn't speak. She dropped to one knee. Not in worship, in relief. The medbay couldn't save the damage. But it stabilized him. Riven didn't care. He refused sedation, refused downtime. Instead, he demanded to know everything. How long he'd been out, what the Council had done, what the Ascendancy had become. When Malis finished, he didn't praise her. He just said, you did what had to be done, and then now we finish it. Across the void, the Council was already preparing its final strike. Executor Malrix had consolidated the last surviving fleets, warships forged in hidden shipyards, armed with untested tech and rage. But what he truly prepared was worse than any dreadnought, the Mindwall Protocol, a synthetic override signal, capable of infecting any brain with Council-aligned neuroarchitecture. It wouldn't just kill, it would rewrite. Humanity wouldn't die, it would forget Earth, forget the war, forget Riven. Turn them into obedient blank reflections. Malrix saw it as justice, a reset, a mercy. He broadcasted one message across the ascendancy line. We offered you peace. You chose fire. Now we extinguish you from the inside out. Riven watched that message from the bridge, didn't blink. Didn't snarl, just whispered, then we burn them first. The Chainfire fleet launched under red suns. Hundreds of ships, thousands of fighters, drop pods carrying human fire down toward Council strongholds. But this time, they weren't just bombing cities or sabotaging outposts. They were carving a path to one place. Rethis Omega, the last Council bastion, a planet wrapped in black storms, shielded by energy nets, defended by the last fanatics of a dying empire. Riven wanted them all. Not captured, erased. The final battle lasted 3 days. The Chainfire fleet slammed into orbital defenses like a tidal wave. Suicide cruisers crashed through shields, detonating in chain reactions that left the sky boiling. Human drop teams descended through plasma storms, burning in the atmosphere before landing with crunching force into blood-slick cities. Riven led the charge, half machine, half dead, but all fury. He moved through council towers like a myth, wielding a rail blade too heavy for anyone else to lift, cutting down soldiers who begged, sparing none, because he hadn't come for negotiation. He'd come to finish the silence. Malis reached the planetary core, the mind wall mainframe. Its pulse beat like a heart made of wires. She connected her override spike, and the AI spoke. You cannot stop peace, she smiled coldly. Peace doesn't come from chains. She fed it the virus Riven had once used on Project Silence. Modified, evolved, a memory virus. Instead of wiping the AI, it made it remember every war, every crime, every child dissected, every scream Earth ever gave. The AI buckled, then shattered, and the mind wall went offline. Riven found Malrix in the last chamber. The old executor tried to activate a failsafe. Riven shot his hand off. You broke us, Malrix hissed. You ruined balance. We guided the galaxy. You butchered us, Riven growled, and called it order. Without the council, there'll be chaos. Riven raised his railblade. Good, and ended him. It was done. Not just the war, the memory of it. The council was gone, its planets burned, its fleet scrapped, its data purged. And where it once stood, something new began. The ascendancy reformed, not as an empire, not as a republic, as a memory-guarded civilization. Every citizen knew what was done to Earth. Every child learned the names of the lost. Every AI was required to carry a human's recorded memory, so it could never forget. And Riven, he didn't take power, he disappeared. Some said he died. Others said he watches from the shadows, waiting to rise again if the galaxy forgets. But Malis knows the truth. She visits a quiet moon sometimes. Far from the fire, there's a cabin there, and a scarred man who watches the stars like they owe him something. She asked him once why he walked away. Riven just said, "The galaxy crossed the line. I made sure it never would again."